This video is a look at experiencing a poem, using the example of A Day Without an Immigrant, Dallas, Texas, by Shin Yu Pai. To experience a poem, I would start by reading it out loud to see how it sounds, to experience my reaction to it. At Pearl Street Station, two brown-skinned men in painter's pants stand out in a sea of white. I am just one more face sticking out in a crowd, and it is my privilege that prevents me from understanding why. The workers want to know how to buy one-way trips. The automated machine sells only one round-trip fee. Back to where you came from. He isn't asking me for change, says it clear enough so that there can be no mistake. Si, yo sé. But $1.50 is a lot of money. When I read this, I notice a lot of things that other people may not have noticed, because I am a professor of English and creative writing and a poet. So I pay attention to elements of craft from the perspective of a writer. For instance, this particular poet decided to let "it is my privilege" to stand on its own and use an ampersand versus the word "and" or a comma. And I also notice that back to where you came from stands alone. So what I'm going to say next moves into analysis, but I do that naturally because of my practice in reading and analyzing poetry. Back to where you came from is a direct reference to the common anti-immigrant response that people who are immigrants from other countries should just go back where they came from. And here, of course, it is a double meaning, because back to where they came from is where their trip originated. And the line about privilege is something that the poet intentionally isolates to stand in a line by itself versus in a couplet, as it's used earlier. For anyone who doesn't know, the line "si, yo sé" translates to mean yes, I understand, or I know, which you may or may not know depending on your knowledge of Spanish. One of the other things is A Day Without an Immigrant is not only a reference to this particular poem and the particular place, but it's also part of a protest movement within the immigrant community and their allies to stage Days Without an Immigrant. For instance, in February of 2017, they held a day without an immigrant to illustrate what would happen if immigrants were not part of the infrastructure of the United States, by boycotting, not going to work, closing businesses, and so on and so forth. And so the title is also an allusion. When looking at this poem, I was struck by the fact that I still have difficulty when people are referred to by their skin color, two brown-skinned men. I naturally think two men with brown skin, but that's not written in active voice. And I think that one of the things she's pointing out by having it be two brown-skinned men is the fact that we frequently see people by their ethnic identity rather than seeing them as individuals. And just one more face sticking out in a crowd. Here, she's pointing out to the fact that she stands out in a crowd, in a sea of white herself, because Shin Yu Pai is the daughter of Taiwanese immigrants. And as a result, we see that she sees things differently than others in the same crowd. But because of her economic standing, her privilege, she can understand why $1.50 is too much money. Many people who are Latino immigrants working in the United States send money to their families in their country of origin. So they do have limited resources in what they could spend on a daily basis in the United States. So these are things I thought about, and I loved the fact that this poem asks you to develop an emic perspective. We often judge people based on their behavior and our own experiences, but this poem is asking us to understand how they see this. And they see this very differently because of their own economic standing and economic needs. So, this would be an example of my own response to this poem. And um, I will say that after having read it, my next step was to learn more about the poet and her experiences and her cultural background. And we'll look into how to do that.